What's going on, guys? It's Zeit. I am back and I am bringing you a Human Torch build video today, and I'm going to tell you it's being fueled by chocolate milk. I've recently switched from drinking pop to chocolate milk and I feel great! But anyways, aside from me, let's not even bother talking about me. Let's get straight into the build and what's going on here. This build is a 46/41/37 build, so it's kind of all over the place. And I had to retweak it. I was gonna do this build a long time ago, but it recently, Human Torch got patched, and I fully expect for him to get nerfed in the future because he is doing a devastating level amount of damage. He's nowhere near like what he was in the test center, but he's still doing a stupid amount of damage. So anyways, let's get right into it. The very first talent that you want to max out to 20 as soon as humanly possible is Fuel the Flame. You want to max this out because it's the core of your damage for everything that has a spark power on it. That means that anything with a spark power is going to ignite this passive, which does damage over time. So anything, AoEs especially, will ignite everything on fire with that spark ability if it has the quote-unquote spark in its name. So this ability, like I said, being a passive, it'll 100% of the time go off and cause a lot of damage. Alright, next ability up is Flame On, and easily the strongest ability, and you'll want to have this the second ability that you max out to 20. It does significant damage because 1, it also applies your passive. 2, it does stupid dot damage as long as you stay stacked on top of the mob that you are fighting. So bosses in particular, if you're right up in them, like I'm talking like stealing their virginity, this particular ability will do so much damage, it's ridiculous. The biggest drawback though is exactly that. You gotta stay melee ranged, and that puts you to open risk. With that being said though, you can pair this up with Protective Flames, which will help you reduce some of the incoming damage. And once thermal intensity is repaired, this, I believe, even with the 30-second cooldown, will still be your strongest ability you can possibly use for both taking out groups as well as taking out bosses and melting them extremely fast. Very few mobs in the game are more dangerous than the Doom arrow bots. So this ability, while it can take them out fast, you gotta be really careful when they do their ground pound because they will still take you out in a split second. Thermal Intensity's up next, and this one's a weird one. It currently doesn't function properly. It only really adds damage to your passives and one of your AoEs, or 2 of your AoEs possibly. I haven't tested Firewall yet. But I would skip this ability, maybe put 1 point into it just so you get use of your affixes from gear, +1 attributes, and +1 to all of the Hothead Tree attributes if you have any. So that way you're getting some damage out of it, but not much. Keep in mind though that this one's a really tricky one to use when it does go live and actually works properly. It's almost like it's an aura around Human Torch, and you do not want to just zip in, drop something and zip out thinking that'll work. It won't work that way. You have to stay within melee range, so this will work very strongly paired up with Flame On. Anyways, let's head on to the next talent. Scorching Fires is the next ability we're dealing with, and this particular ability is your main damage ability for single and multi-target when Flame On is, well, off. Basically, it'll really help you out in a pinch. The only bad thing about it is it's a mid-range attack ability, so that means particular bosses like Magneto, who has a very destructive ability like his Magnetic Storm, where you really don't want to be caught inside of that, this ability might end up causing you a lot of damage. So you'll want to use Hindsight with this ability, place it rather than land it on the target in certain situations, and kite stuff through it. Now this ability also has a long cast time. Well, long as far as most characters go. So you definitely don't want to be doing it in a situation where there's a possibility of getting stunned or knocked back, because then you're never going to get the ability off. But if you manage to get it off first and just kite around through it, you'll be okay. Protective Flames! Without this ability, you're little more than a flaming skid mark to any villain. Human Torch is one of the squishiest heroes they have come up with yet, and with this particular ability, you stand a fighting chance. The way this ability works is it reduces damage, X amount of damage per spirit spent. Now, at first I thought this was a terrible idea because I thought it was going to eat through my spirit like crazy, but in reality, it actually is a fairly good ability to pick up. Well, I mean, honestly, is a required ability to pick up on later levels, but it does not chew through your spirit nearly as fast as you might think it will. As you can see in the video, you'll see the difference of these two villains whooping on my ass with and without the ability, so you'll have a good idea of just how much this ability will soak up. Alright, now we're down to Firewall. This is a very useful utility ability as well as a damaging dot ability. This stacks very well with the Pyre ability, but keep in mind most of these abilities will not stack with themselves. Like, you cannot stack a Firewall on top of a Firewall on top of a Firewall and expect to do extra damage. However, with that being said, you can spread them out and affect a larger range. Keep in mind though that this is a very, very spirit intensive ability, so you're going to want to keep your eye on your spirit if you're spamming Pyre as well as Firewall. Now, the utility from this ability is avoiding projectiles. It'll avoid almost every projectile in the game except for bullet type, which is unfortunate because currently bullet type damage in the game is extremely high. For instance, Human Torch will get 2 to 3 shot within the red terminals. Finally, we're down to Burning Volley. Now, this ability isn't particularly important, but it is in a way. You need to have at least 1 point in it, or you can go with the Searing Arc Fire instead if you don't mind going with a medium range ability. But Burning Volley is the one that I'd put at least 1 point into. When I max my build out, it'll probably go up to about 5 points, maybe even not so. I might switch it back down to putting all of my points into my protective shields and only putting 1 point into this ability, because all it does is help you put out a little bit of damage while your spirit abilities are down. Johnny's ability to regenerate his spirit is so high that, and his damage output I should say, is so high that you don't really need to rely on your basic too often. Currently, Searing Arc Fire has a glitch in it so that you can spam the ability rather than hold it down like the hotkey should be done, and you'll do an insane amount of damage with 1 point in Searing Arc Fire. So between the two, I would start off with Searing Arc Fire and just use that for a long time until that gets patched, or until you just feel like using something a little bit longer range. Alright, so here's the build in its fullest. You can click on the link in the About bar if you want to check it out for yourself, but I'm going to talk about 3 abilities that I didn't previously talk about. We've got Blazing Charge, which you start off with, so regardless you're always going to have 1 point in this, but it's very useful for getting out of sticky situations as well as traveling at a very advanced speed. Then we've got Blazing Flight. This is completely optional, but it also allows you to get over certain obstacles that normally you can't walk over and avoid melee combat from any villains in the area. And finally, the last one is Cleansing Fire. Shake off negative conditions and briefly increase your resistance to these conditions and your dodge. Now, the secondary stats to that are not important. The most important part is being able to break that perma-stun or that perma-freeze or that perma-snare. All those things that might necessarily get you killed. Alright, so the last little tidbits of information that you want to know is what kind of gear prefixes you want to go for. I'll give you a priority, and anything that's very first thing mentioned is the very top priority you want to go for. So let's start off with anything that has gear plus fuel to the flame. Anything that will hit you to 40 points maximum in your build. That's what you want to do. And then next on that, Flame On. You want to get Flame On to about 40 points. After that, this is in regards to thermal intensity while it's working. Right now, it's not currently working, so it's not an important stat to think about. But if you have some gear with thermal intensity on it and you're leveling up, and let's say it's like high level 50-ish gear, hold on to it either way. When this ability is working, you will be in much better shape. Now, crit used to be very low on the scale until they actually patched both your dot damage and your passive ability to be able to crit. So now, since those are able to crit is definitely a very important stat to take. Plus all damage, still very important to take because overall it'll buff everything. Plus to health, very important stat for Human Torch since his survivability is fairly low. And damage on crit, which also has moved up a little bit from right before I started making this build because of the patch on critting dots and your passive. From there we move on to the plus all Hothead Fire Tree skills, and again pay attention to the order. We go Hothead skills first, then Firebrand skills, and then Bravo skills. Very last, you have attack speed, which it's not very important. Attack speed really doesn't make much of a difference. It does not change the amount of times that your dots will cause damage and what have you, so it will not really make any difference for that. And one stat that we say to completely avoid, all new and myself, we've tested defense penetration, and honestly, we felt it really made little to no change at all. It was almost impossible to see a difference in numbers, so we're not quite sure if defense penetration is actually functioning, or it just doesn't work with certain powers that we were testing with. Hope you enjoyed my torch setup video, and I hope it helps you out in the long run. Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section if you have any questions, or go check me out on Facebook and Twitter. There is also a link to my guide from the Marvel base site in the About section. And don't forget to like and favorite the video if you enjoyed it. I'll catch you guys on the flip side.